we'll go ahead and get started. I apologize for the delay. I made an announcement at the Tuesday's assembly meeting that the Public Safety Committee meeting would be at our normal location at the library. It was my error. I've been trying to make adjustments for some members who normally would.
We are on the record of this, aren't we?
Yes, we are on the
That was
record.
your error.
My error. Time now is 10:12 a.m. This is the Public Safety Committee meeting, January, Thursday the 29th. And the chair had assigned 3 committees to review Assembly Ordinance 2015-10 and 10S. It's an ordinance submitting to qualified voters establishing a dedicated alcohol sales tax for the purpose of funding projects related to alcohol treatment. Now, that's a synopsized version of the actual heading. I believe we'll have, if you don't have it already, you should have copies of the ordinance available. And so the Public Safety Committee was one of them, and so this is really the new business that we will address today. I know that Chief New had a meeting scheduled at 9:30, and he would, for the members of this committee, he said he would start the meeting, turn it to his deputy chief, and move his way here. So I just confirmed with him or texted him to remind him that it's here. I did see him last night and said he would be here. And so I don't have my copy with me. I believe I have. So in general, it's in keeping with, I believe it's in order that this committee, after reviewing the ordinance from the issues of public safety, should make a recommendation to the body as a whole. And so I would say at the conclusion of our meeting, if this committee feels moved to, we should perhaps consider making a motion to make a recommendation to the body of the whole. If we need further information or review or research, we certainly can do that. If you feel that's in order, we can either call another meeting or wait till our February meeting. When is the ordinance back before us for?
Tuesday night.
So then we should
Yeah, we're all being caught kind of by surprise because there's only one week between these 2 meetings.
Yes.
So if I can comment with you,
Yes.
Chairman. So the Budget and Finance Committee reviewed the ordinance, and the Ad hoc Committee on Alcohol and Drug Abuse reviewed the ordinance, and neither one of those committees made a recommendation on the percentage of tax. They just didn't do it.
Okay.
Nor did any of those committees make a recommendation to the body whether or not to approve the ordinance. Just on his lap. And I know this is the Public Safety Committee, the decision is yours, obviously.
Well, and I will certainly respect the will of the committee. I'm not committed to hold on to simply the appointed chair for a number of years. But I do believe there's some merit to diving in a little bit on the research on the actual ordinance. The concern that I've heard from members of the industry is that there's nothing in concrete, no specific plans for treatment programs or emergency transportation. And one concern that I've heard from the industry at least has been if we do what we've always done, then we're just simply putting more money to issues or programs that we already got that perhaps aren't working. So I see some merit to the statement being made, and I do believe that I'd like to at this point open, and just like I said, Chief New should be here shortly to give his perspective from the police side of it. But with the S version, there's been some changes towards I think Mr. Hall, I think I'd like to, if you wouldn't mind, for the committee, the maker of the original ordinance, Mr. Trainee is here, and then laid on the table this past meeting.
The versions over here.
The S version. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to hear maybe. So I'm sorry I was out of town, so I'm aware of the actual ordinance, but I wanted to see if there's any discussion.
Sure. Well, if it's any consolation to you, this all began at this meeting.
Sure, Paul.
Last month.
Something of a videotape you did.
Yes.
And so following that, I met with Mr. Trainee to discuss an ordinance that he's had for some time. And, I told him I left there with a real feeling of frustration because this is one of those things that's been worked on in this community for probably 40 years. And there is a lot done by different organizations in our community to try to deal with the inebriated alcoholism treatment problem. But when I left there, I met with Dick and I said, you know, I could actually get with you. I'm not an advocate of taxing by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a problem that's of a size that we need to do something. It is having an impact on everybody within our community. I don't go to a community council meeting that we don't spend the majority of the meeting discussing either people camping in their yards, people in bus pickups, people in the parks on the bench, just a constant matter of things that are defecating in my front door. Kids are seeing things we don't want them to see. So I told Dick I would be willing to kind of work with it if he saw it free, that we could, number one, put it above the cap and dedicate it specifically for this purpose. And I said the other thing that I see is we need a fair amount of funding to be able to get some facilities that we've all talked about. We've got some detox beds, but we don't have enough. We've got Carlet Manor, but you know we don't have enough room, so we've got this one element of people to keep circulating through the system and costing us a huge amount of money. It's taking our police force and our fire department, the personnel hours that are going into this problem is beyond comprehension. And what we're beginning to see is examples of where we've got police officers or we've got firemen tied up on an individual down, and there'll be something that's much more major consequence that's happening, but they can't be that individual. So, you know, we'll have an incident where Station 1 maybe with a person down, and then we've got a coronary that needs attention, and they're having to come from Station 2 to do the coronary. So where it should be a 3-minute response, that may turn into a 7 or 8-minute response because of the fact that we've got a police department tied down. So in our original title on this, it refers to public safety. Dedicate the revenue to health and public safety uses. So we heard back that people, don't trust government, and they think this is an end run where we could tax above the cap and put all the money into public safety, which we would take it and fund fire and police. So that's when I changed and came back with the alternate language down in the body that says this is for alcohol treatment, emergency transportation, and housing programs, including housing programs for chronic inebriates. Now, this I basically came up from, I would tell you I haven't studied in depth the work that was done by the committee or the group that was headed up by Darrell Hess when he was the homeless coordinator. But I did set in on a number of the meetings when they were concluding that, making their conclusions and recommendations. And these are all things that I heard that they had in document that ended up with an end product. So my thought on that was that would be a starting point. But everything that we get to, there's no revenue. I mean, they do the work and it comes down and there's no revenue to pay for what's been identified as an issue. So in chatting with Dick, I said if we're able to identify a revenue stream that can be used for nothing but this, it's going to have to go specifically for that issue. We need to do it where we could possibly do a revenue bond. That revenue from this tax could be used to pay the debt service on a revenue bond. And we met with legal and they said yes, that was doable. We could do that. We would use, I would see part of this money being used for the treatment and possibly the emergency transportation of some of these people. So where we're at then is I came in with a new language. We laid this on the table. And I know that, we get caught in a catch-22 because we have one or two things happen. If we roll out this and we say, here's the plan, we're going to build this, we're going to build this, we're going to build this, and we're going to fund this and this. If I'd introduce that, then the comments coming to us is, how did you put this together without community input? I mean, you've already decided what you're going to do, and we need to be a part of it. if I roll it out without that, then it's, we don't have a plan. How can we support this? I am where I am because I believe this is the biggest thing facing this community. I believe we need to identify a revenue source. I guess, you know, being able to levy a tax on alcohol, maybe some people do, you're doing that because it's easy. I don't think it's going to be easy. We already know that apparently the alcohol industry is willing to spend
$1 million?
Was hundreds of thousands, if that's what it takes to defeat this. But no matter where we go with this, it keeps coming back to, you know, everybody lays it at the foot of the alcohol industry. Now, I understand that that's not necessarily true. When we're talking about inebriates, you know, a lot of these people are individuals that are just alcoholic. I mean, they are an alcoholic. And I think we've all been around long enough that it's kind of like tobacco. Everybody's finally acknowledged that tobacco will harm you. And I think people have got to the point where the majority of us realize that alcoholism is a disease. The only way to do it is hopefully treating it. And it's one that's really hard to cure. Because you know, you can have an alcoholic, you can have a diabetic, you can have someone with congestive heart failure, and you can have an individual with cancer. Here, it's easy to pick out the alcoholic because they look like an alcoholic. So I don't know how you move past that. But the reason I am where I am is this is a problem. We've talked about it for 40 years. Quite frankly, we've got to quit talking about it, and we got to do something about it. And the only way we can do something about it is with a revenue source that can be dedicated to the enterprise. And I am hopeful that we can get 8 of our fellow assembly members to agree that we need to give the community time to engage. We have 2 months prior to the election for the community to engage in this conversation and make a decision on whether this is the right way to do it. If we don't do this, quite frankly, I have no idea how we're going to deal with this.
Now, some people say, wait for Juno to fund it. Because part of our alcohol tax is supposed to go towards this. Juno cannot dedicate a revenue stream.
Yeah.
The problem is, we don't get the money from Juno. But what happened this year? Privy went down there, asking for $4 million for a program they wanted to do to treat people in that area. Very last moment, the money got taken, snatched from it. You can't come to Juno. They've got their own fiscal problems. As we're going to see every day as the rest of them fall. You're going to see Juno levying more taxes. If we want to take care of our town, we have to do it ourselves. That means giving this to the voters. Let them vote on it. There's not a one of us on the assembly doesn't get calls from people upset about laborers on the streets, homelessness all over Anchorage. If we don't take care of it, it's just going to get worse and worse. So, you know, it's not going to be funded. So, I want to give it to the voters, let them vote on it.
The other thing that I would hope would happen would be if we did get this on the ballot and it did pass, that we as a community, as an elected group, would go to the legislators and tell them, okay, you're always telling us to put skin in the game. Well, we're putting a lot of skin in this game, and we want our share of the alcohol tax that we can put with this, dedicated to the purpose of dealing with this issue. And I think we would have a real strong message in doing that because, quite frankly, the legislators need to step up and help this because we are the hub. We are where people are migrating to, and we end up with it being our problem when it's really a statewide problem.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Let the record reflect, Mr. Chief Mew made it, was able to make it to the meeting, and I apologize for interrupting your other meeting, Chief. So this Public Safety Committee was directed towards the ordinance pertaining to the alcohol sales tax proposal that, if passed, would go to the voters for 50% plus one. There's been an S version, I'm not sure if you saw that. You might be just getting it the first time. And so, Ms. Gray Jackson has a comment, but I just wanted you to know that in general, initially it was fairly broad in revenue to health and public safety uses. But if you look under section A, you can see what has been struck out and what has been added underlined in bold. So there's emphasis more towards the treatment, emergency transportation, and housing. Ms. Gray Jackson. Sorry.
But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to say, well, number one, as a member of this committee, and also as a member of this legislative branch of government, I support absolutely what you're saying, Mr. Hall, what Mr. Train has to say. And like I've always said, I support this ordinance and its intent. But like I always do with any other legislation, except for equal rights, I always listen to the community before I make a decision on how I'm going to vote. And that's, how I deal with every single subject matter. And again, I support this and I support its intent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I want to make just a few comments, and also I may have questions of each of you, because I both respect your positions, and we certainly have had discussions in this committee for several years, engaged with looking at budgets of public safety. I know you haven't had a chance to review this entire ordinance. I'm not sure if you looked at the S version, but I'm not sure if you looked at the initial ordinance. Chief, do you have any, I guess I'm going to ask you in a broad perspective, do you have any ideas or thoughts on the actual ordinance or what it may bring about to change? Is it helpful to the police service area? Is it something that could...
Well, I guess I should start by saying I don't know that we have. I don't have a read yet on whether the administration is weighing in for or against or neutral on the proposal for the new tax. That's sort of above my pay grade. I asked last night what our position was, and I think we don't have one yet. But are you asking me if I think that it would be good if there was more money to address the underlying problems that we have here in town with regard to chronic public inebriates and so forth? Of course, I would like to see more resources for treatment, for transportation. I'd like to see more resources for public safety and all that, but if it's not for me and it's for treatment and housing and so forth, I mean, why would I be opposed to that? The tax issue, whether or not we support an alcohol tax, I don't know what the city's position is going to be on that, but certainly I think putting more resources towards addressing the problems that seem to be insidious here is something that would be beneficial.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Did we even dodge enough?
No, I think you were fairly, I think you're fairly pointed in that. I want to make a comment to my colleagues and certainly the members present today. There is audience participation, and we'll open that up here shortly. We do have about half an hour left, so there's members from the industry and there's members of the public, and our ombudsman is here who's spending an inordinate amount of time with a vast amount of time dealing with homeless. I'd certainly love to hear from Mr. Hess on some of your learned research that you did in your former position currently, as well as the ombudsman. I know that you and your team were at the Project Homeless Connect yesterday and spent a lot of time, and so I know that we value your assessment. The Wasilla Police Department, I want to say it's been about 20 years going on, 15, 20 years seems like, came into being. For the longest time, Palmer had its own police department, and I'm not sure how they fund their revenue base. I suspect it's similar to the Anchorage, maybe some property tax or something. The Wasilla did not have its own police department. It relied on trooper police service, much like the rest of the outlying state that are not incorporated municipalities that have the tax. So I agree with you, Mr. Hall, and I've made this comment many a time, and I think I'm fairly consistent on record. If we could make our services available to the public and run our city programs without having to generate revenue by any form of tax, I'd love it. But I'm also a realist, and that's just not possible. We need the services for first-class city. We are a growing city. And I've said this before on the record, and I know that I'm not the only one, that I believe currently at present state that we're adequately serving a city of about 225,000. The problem is we're about 300,000. So our services, for one reason or another, and we're kind of we're one branch of government, and we're at the cusp of how do we fund programs that we think, or police services, or fire services, or road services, within the constraints of the tax cap and where we're at within our budget. And I know that we're very blessed that we have the actual tax cap and the actual charter language that says we have to balance our budget. Unlike the federal government where they just take out more money or spend more money, I don't know, but they seem to be able to operate in deficit, and that's a problem. The state government, of course, has something we don't. They have control over the resources, the mining and oil and revenue, so they can generate funds where we can't. We don't own oil and all that stuff. Supposed to have the gas business, but. So my point is that the Wasilla Police Department initially was generated through, stood up, if you will, established with a sales tax in Wasilla, and it was set at 3%. Now, I'm speaking from memory, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I can get it rather easily. At the end of the first year, they realized that 3% was far and above what they needed to operate a police service. They did their calculations at their treasury, and they said, we could operate within the 2%. And their council, the recommendation of the mayor, they recommended a reduction, and they went down 1%. And a lot of people almost had a heart attack and fell over because prevailing thought is once you institute a tax at any rate, it never goes down, it usually goes up from there, but it never goes down. Now, a couple of years later, as memory serves me correct, the mayor and the city council presented with other areas of things that they've opportunity to do. One of them was the sports complex, and they raised that tax back up to pay for that, just as you were describing it already. They took bond out for the building of a new facility with the institution of that extra 0.5% raise, an increase in the sales tax, which once paid back, would then again reduce back to 2% level. And my understanding is they've done that. And again, I think the research to do it. So I can tell you that I feel very much like you've all expressed, in that we have to do something. And I'm also very aware that the state apparently doesn't have the ability to dedicate the taxes that they collect from the alcohol industry, or any industry actually. And it's up to their legislature, and I know they're loath to bind future legislatures to anything. So I'm very concerned that whatever money is being collected for alcohol tax by the state, and I heard from the industry around $40 million statewide. So you can roughly project about half of that is coming from acres. And it would be great if we could say we'd like that passed right back through to, take their cut for managing it and pass it right back down to the municipality, so for our services. But I know that we all know the reality is that this isn't really, it hasn't happened, and we probably, and I understand the trust issue, that it probably won't happen. So I am very concerned, and I think you all know where I stand on the area of public safety. I'm very comfortable with the 2015-10. I'm also equally confident and comfortable with the S version. I do believe we need better police services and more enhanced police services for the issues that we have with the city our size. Far along the way goes with fire, EMS, and the CSP for what we do have in the system in place. So I see there's comments. I'm going to yield the floor back. I just wanted you to know that from my perspective, we do need to do something, and yes, we need to identify a funding source, and I'm with you. If we can support this and the community supports this, give them their chance to support it or not, then we'll at least say at the end of our terms, because it's not a definite infinite period, it's finite, that we've at least tried something. And I want to know that I can look myself in the mirror and to other people and say we tried something. So Mr. Hall, you go first, and Mr. Lieutenant.
Yeah, I think with the state, number one, and I don't know if Daryl's had a chance to check this out or validate it, but I've heard that the state's report to this is we collect 40 and we spend 47 million. We've been asking for a breakdown of the first 47 million being spent. Daryl, did you ever?
My understanding is that the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority is working on a document that outlined that. I had actually heard that the tax collected is 38 to 40 million and the state's claiming that they spend upwards of $67 million a year on
So
issues related to
67.
substance abuse.
You're being letters, sir.
Oh, I
So-
said it.
So I don't know, but the other thing is, I want to take away the word will or dedicated, maybe some of the will to returning. Because I think, even with the state collecting it and using their unit at 67, it would be appropriate to return some of that to the community for specific people at the local level. So, that was.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to remind everybody that part of the municipality's legislative request that we approved has asked the state to give us some of our money. I mean, regardless of whether we get it, and we probably won't, but that's still a legislative request. And then secondly, I thought that one of the missions, and neither the Budget Finance Committee nor the Data Committee, but one of the missions, Mr. Training can correct me if I'm wrong, for the committees was to make a recommendation on the amount of tax, the percentage, am I correct, Mr. Training?
No, that wasn't my intention.
Oh, it wasn't? Oh,
My
okay.
intention is let the whole body determine.
Okay,
Because ultimately, the way the language is written, the whole assembly will determine what level of taxation.
okay,
And the assembly will vote on that. That's the reason we're going to do the assembly
Okay.
breakdown. I think we've got it already broken up to 2% and 12%.
okay.
8% is one that came up. It gives us 14 million on a low, 20 million on the high side.
8%,
8%.
14 to where?
20 million.
All right, well, I misunderstood because I thought the committees were going to make a recommendation, just a recommendation, but anyway.
I would like to see the committees come forward with a recommendation to somebody to either send the voters or not. But I don't think we've got the time to do it.
I think we need to give Sylvia and Ann a chance to comment on this. We had a great meeting with them yesterday, and I mean that. I left with a lot of information and a lot of understanding of the effort that you're putting into dealing with this problem. But it's one of those things where I really believe if we're going to do what we need to do with this, we're going to need to try to make an effort to get a substantial sum of money that we can really engage in it. And what I would hope is if this does come to fruition, that you would not back down one bit and remain absolutely engaged and make sure that the money goes where the money needs to go, because that's where a message I've been delivering. Citizens don't understand what it means when we have feet on the floor in the assembly chambers reminding us that you said you were going to do this. But the thing that seems to happen is you do the battle, and it goes a different way, and people say that's business as usual. And it always will be until the citizens of the street stand in that room and say, enough.
At this point, I would like to open it up to audience participation. So I know there's a number of people in the room, and I'm not sure if anybody's prepared to make comments. Mr. Hess, we've heard from you for a moment, and I'd like to get back to you in a minute, but since we have heard from just a snippet, I'm going to open it to others, and then I'll come back to you. So is there anybody that would like to be heard on this particular ordinance before this committee at this time? I want you to know that our public meetings law forbids assembly members from gathering unless it's a publicly noticed meeting to discuss this. So this is the first time, and of course I've told everybody I've been sick the last 2 weeks, preoccupied. So I had the first time that I've actually had to sit down and talk with my colleagues extensively about this issue. I mean, I saw it as it was presented, as everyone else did, and then last committee meeting, we did have an open discussion about some concerns that we've all been saying, and I can tell you, Mr. Training and I did take a ride down towards the Brother Francis shelter and watched literally cardboard and sleeping bags literally right next to the curb on Carlick Street between 3rd and 4th. And this is not just a one-night event. It seems to be a growing and ongoing problem. So is there anyone that would like to, that's in the audience at this time? Yes, sir. If you could just just identify yourself for the record if it's got a unique name as you spell it?
Sure. I'm Dale Fox. I'm the president of Alaska Char. And I'd like to just give a little of the background on the state tax. First off, when the state tax was increased in 2002, it was the Murkowski a dime a drink tax, which raised us to the highest tax in the nation. The promises made then were that the money would go to detox and rehab and fetal alcohol syndrome education. What happened indeed at the next 10 years was they decreased the budget for those things. And all you have to do is look at the community and see how many detox and rehab beds we have today versus before. And it's the same across the state. Alaska Char took up this issue back in 2008, made it one of our top legislative priorities to see that this money was spent properly. People on the assembly saying, make sure the industry gets involved to make sure the money's spent properly. We've been trying to do that with the state government since 2008. And we've asked them to spend the $40 million on what they promised to do back in 2002. In fact, Johnny Ellis put in a piece of legislation saying 100% of that money should be dedicated or should be appropriated to this effort. And what happened was interesting, because we made a fatal error in our political positioning. We thought that if we helped get the political will to pass the revenue, of course Health and Social Services would have a plan for how to spend it and spend it wisely. What happened, in fact, when Johnny Ellis put forward a bill that said, let's appropriate all $40 million for these efforts? Some of the conservative members of the legislature said, we'd like to see the plan. And after 12 years of collecting $40 million a year, the state still didn't have a plan. Now they say they spend the money. Make no mistake about that. They spend the money on general government, on conferences and people in offices. But if you ask if the money's where the rubber meets the road, in a rehab center or a detox center, or additional efforts to get rid of fetal alcohol syndrome, you know from the testimony you've received from others that the money's not getting to them. So it hasn't worked at the state. The promises were made. We're hearing the same thing from politicians again. Murkowski, when she put through this bill, was a dime a drink. We still don't know the percentage that you guys are going to put forward. But if it's 10%, that's 50 cents a drink if you order a $5 beer. If you order a $7 glass of wine, it's more than that. And so we're talking a huge tax on the working man. It didn't work at the state. And then we've got the other issue of what would you spend the money on? Well, we've focused on detox and rehab because we believe that when people have messed up their life enough that they've decided that they don't want to live that way anymore and they want to get help, we should be there with help available. And the reality is, in this community and all across the state, if you need help and you've decided you've messed up your life and you need to get into detox and rehab, you go to the agencies and they say, well, maybe we can get you in 6 months. How about 4 months? Come back in 9 months. And you know what happens to those people? Is they moved on in 6 months. They're not at their low point of their life anymore, and they don't reappear. But even if you spend all the money on detox and rehab, the issue of chronic street inebriants, if you've just read the daily news stories alone, they're not interested in, a vast majority of them are not interested in detox and rehab and getting their life straight. They're happy with what they're doing. They want to sleep under the stars, one of them said in the newspaper the other day. They want to have no rules. So they're different problems. detox and rehab is needed for people in every portion of our society, not just street people. Every portion of our society has people who have had more than their share of alcohol or drugs. Chronic inebriates, street inebriates, nobody's had a plan. And every couple of years, the Assembly says exactly what you said, Mr. Honeman. We don't know what to do, but we got to do something. And let me just remind you of a couple of actions you've taken and how well they've worked. We heard just a couple of years ago, if we pass the red stripe law, that the chronic inebriates won't be able to get alcohol, and that'll solve the problem. And Assemblyman sat up there and said, we got to do something, so let's do it. Has it worked? Not worth a damn. A few years before that, we said, geez, if we just didn't sell small quantity bottles, minis, we could outlaw those, that'll solve the problem. Did it work? No. Before that, we said, you know, we've got people dying on the streets, so if we just had a community service patrol, we'll solve the problem, because we'll get those people, we'll get them sobered up, and we'll talk to them, and we'll get them help. Did it work? Maybe for a few people. So again, we're in that posture of we don't have a plan, and we want to do something. We're frustrated. We all are frustrated. So let's just do something even if it's wrong. My suggestion to you is that we need to think this through and come up with a plan where we actually could maybe do something. And we also should come to the understanding there's some people we can't help. That's my thought. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comment?
I would like to say also, you know, and,
State the name of the record.
I'm sorry, Sylvia Belemidez, Director of the Alaska Hospitality Retailers. And it's the same as we have talked before. You know, chronic inebriates is a problem, and we share with you. And we all want a solution to this problem. But taxing the liquor industry is not going to solve the problem. You know, again, like Heidi, you know, our vice president was saying, of our association was saying, and keeps telling everybody that trust is not there. You know, they went after some money and it was taken away from them after it was given to them for those particular services. We have a problem with the homeless, chronic inebriates. They do not want to be indoors. The Carlock Manor, you know, 4 of those clients or residents have died outside because they don't want to go in there. They're probably just going there to sleep, but they're always hanging out in the streets. What we need to do, and you know, and I'm quoting again Ed O'Neill, we need to have a what he's always called the tent city, which is an outside campground where it's supervised for those that do not want to be indoors, living in tents. And then maybe I heard Mr. Honeyman talk to me yesterday in regards to another plan, you know, that gradually move up in different sections of life as they show responsibility and how they're moving along with their illness. There has to be a way for us to go back to our grassroots and get the community involved so that we can come up with a solution. The tax is not going to do it. It's just going to be a tax today. Then, you know, in the last 15 years, I've been fighting, you see me all the time about the liquor tax, you know, and it's like ongoing. So we need to do something that's really going to be done and or something that is going to have a plan behind it. Again, you know, you keep saying let the voters decide. So here we are changing the threshold from a 60% to a 50%. So if we're going to let the voters decide, leave it as it is. And let the voters really make the decision if that's the way you really think. Don't change the charter. That was something that the voters decided on, which we were promised in 2005 that it was not going to be touched again, and it happened again. So there's a lot of concern, and I'm sure I know you all have heard it from me, but it's a big concern. And I don't know if Diane wants to
No, I think you and Dale have said everything, the way that our organization feels and the way.
What's your name?
I'm sorry, Diane Thompson. I have Fire Tap in South Anchorage, and I'm the president of AHR. But everything that Dale and Sylvia said is exactly the way our industry feels. And this morning's paper kind of shocked me when I saw that the state is now giving $15 million to remodel the historical part of the museum. So they have that money.
You know, Mr. Fox mentioned that a lot of these folks don't want to take up the opportunities we have for them, and I think he's right about that. But I think regardless of the tax issue you're debating today, I think one of the holes in the system for a long time has been the capacity of Title 47 committals, which would pick up that segment of the population. In other words, they don't want to be treated, but we will treat them anyway. And we're not doing as much in that realm as we probably could be.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. Anybody else wish to? Mr. Hess, I know you've spent an inordinate amount of time, meaningful and vast amount of time.
Well, you know, I've lived in Anchorage. It'll be 50 years this August. We moved here in August 1965. I was 12 years old. And I've seen a lot of changes in Anchorage, but one thing that hasn't changed is we're still having this discussion. I was 12 years old when we moved here, and we were discussing the chronic public inebriates and how do we deal with this issue. And 50 years later, we're still talking about it. And I would disagree. We do have plans. We have a lot of plans. We have a lot of ideas. We know the things we need to do to mitigate this. We've had blue ribbon panels, mayoral task force, kitchen cabinets. I've read them. There's a stack this thick. And they all talk about supportive housing, treatment services, wraparound services for these individuals. We know what the solutions are, but we've never been able to get the funding. And one of the reasons that I believe, based on my experience, you know, I've lived in Fairview for 28 years. I was the council president there for 5 years. I was the homeless coordinator for 3 years. And in 2.5 years as ombudsman, we get dozens of calls in our office from your constituents that are upset what's going on in their parks, what's going on in the strip of land to the west of Rogers Park where the people are camping. I spend a lot of time on the phone with the CAP team talking about these issues. And the bottom line is local government, other than a 50-year, $1-a-year lease for the land where Brother Francis Shelter is, and $2.8 million in pass-through federal dollars for to fund the continuum of care. Local government doesn't spend any money for solutions. We spend money for the Community Service Patrol and the Sleep Off Center, $2 million a year, that really is just to make sure people don't freeze to death on the streets. It doesn't really, it's not a solution. And I was one of those people several years ago that was emailing the assembly and the mayor saying, get those people off my street corners, APD needs to do their job, they need to do something about this. We can't police this away. It's not a police issue, it's a societal issue. We have fewer treatment beds in Anchorage now than Fairbanks has. We have less than half as many treatment beds as we had in the city 35 years ago. Bottom line is, I'll never forget, I was at a meeting that Jim Crockett and I did every quarter at Beans Cafe. We said people always talk at this population, but we never talk with them. So once a quarter, we would take APD down there, people mover, we'd do a little education piece, and then we would engage with them. And this was during the Carlick Manor Red Nose Inn debate, and we asked people, if you could get into Carlick Manor, how many of you are interested in housing? And over 100 people raised their hands for 46 rooms. And one of those people stood up and said, you know, the neighborhood doesn't want us in their backyards, they don't want us in our parks, they don't want us doing our, using the toilet behind the building. Then we got to have a place to go. We're not just going to disappear. So they understood the issue. And I would disagree that the majority of them don't want a place to live. I've been in the camps, I've engaged with them. The majority of them do want a place to live. They don't want to be sleeping in the woods. There's a small population that don't want to follow the rules. But if you offer, the question is, you ask them, do you want housing? Most of them will say no. But if you say, do you want housing without conditions, in other words, housing first, most of them will say yes. So frequently, it's how you phrase the question. But bottom line is, we know what we need to do, but we never have the money to do it.
To follow up, have there been, and I know we're getting close to time, but have there been any dollar amounts, projection to some of these solutions? That it might take to adequately address
There, Diane Engel, when she was the Director of Health and Human Service, she and I met with the Commissioner at Health and Social Services and the Mental Health Trust Authority. There was actually a plan that was put together for a treatment center. And the mayor was thinking about using city land over by the snow dump to the east of Brother Francis Shelter. So there's studies out there on what it would cost to rehab Clitheroe or replace Clitheroe. There are documents. It's just gathering them.
And I know, of course, it has to be updated for a date certain. There might have been 10 years ago study.
It's like 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Mr. Hall.
I'm actually, with my aide, Ira, we're making an effort to try to pull that information together for Tuesday. I hope I can have some idea about what we're talking about at that point. But I really, if this gets on the ballot and passes, I would see a citizens task force being put together that take all of the information that we've got and prioritize 1, 2, 3, so that they would have real ownership about what we're going to do. But with that, I would like to make a motion that we encourage the body to send this to the community for a vote and discussion. It's the #1 problem in our community. We'd be dealing with it on 2 levels, in that by providing treatment and housing, the level that we could do with this, I think what it would do is free up our police and fire department to be remarkable if we're able to break the cycle where they're dealing with the same individuals day after day after day. So I would make the motion that we send this to the body with the recommendation that I would use the term serious consideration be given to forwarding this to the community for
Ms. Bridette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I offer a secondary motion and then we can move back? Because my motion is that this committee supports AO 2015-10S and its intent. That's my motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second that
Can we vote on this?
and withdraw mine.
Okay, so, just to make sure it's clear.
And those are great.
Ms. Easley,
Okay,
you
no,
got
I
the-
can write it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. This, I'm gonna talk about, this committee supports AO 2015-10S and its intent. It's pretty simple.
Okay, and it was, motion was made by Ms. Gray Jackson,
Right.
seconded by Mr. Hall for the record.
Yes.
Okay, got that? Any objections? Okay. So Mr. Hall, you
No
object?
objection, no comment.
So that motion, recommendation will
To Mr. Fox, Sylvia, Diane, I don't disagree with anything that any of you have said, not for a moment. I'm so frustrated with this, it's unbelievable that government constantly makes promises that they don't keep, that they just don't fulfill. And the pathetic part about it is, we got the greatest government in the world, but it's a government that is constantly changing. And every 2 years, we changed our legislature, and every 2 years, we do the same thing on this body. And things that are of importance to this particular seated body, the next one comes in, and number one, they come in, they're probably not even aware of what it is we try to decide, and they have different values. But on this one, I can't let it go, because I I genuinely believe that I've got a community that's telling me this is the number one problem, you gotta do something about it. And quite honestly, with doing this, I'm going to give them an opportunity if we get it on the ballot, and if they don't step up and vote for it, I can honestly look at them and say, I don't know, you're going to have to figure it out, because I have no other ideas. It's got to have some funding, and I think this would be a start, and if we go and lobby the legislature and try to get them to do what they should be doing, maybe we can resolve this problem. And I'll tell you what, if we ever do, at that point in time, whatever the liquor industry does at this point, we'll be able to stand up and say, well, you need to send us a thank you note because we funded resolving this for you, finding a way to do it.
I'm going to make a closing comment to my colleagues and to the members present, and that is, I'm very concerned about what we have been doing, and I'm not intending, and I thank you for your comments, Mr. Hall, I echo that. I'm not intending to always do what we've always done, because that would be by definition insanity. I would like to be able to say that should this pass by the will of voters, that this funding would be directed and controlled by this body in this municipality, and not necessarily directed or redirected by other entities such as the state or federal government, that we would have control of this funding to do the programs that we need, that we recognize and see at the local level. And I believe it starts with reinvesting into a homeless coordinator or someone that can help us guide the resources directly without the interference of or the lobbying, for lack of better terms, so that funding like the $4 million that was redirected, doesn't happen on my watch or the future watch. This training.
The difference is the state cannot dedicate the funds. We can. So the public knows where this money's going. And that's a complete different critter. Jim is never going to step up to the plate and give us our percentage of that money. We've got so many demands for where it's at now. And I appreciate we're going and asking for it. We can ask them for the world. It doesn't mean they can deliver or will deliver it to us. We can send this to voters and we can then tell the voters exactly where the money's going. There's enough plans out there. As he will tell you, what, about 4 feet of plans? Daryl? About 4 foot of plans?
No, 2.5.
Okay. The plans are out there. They all lack one thing, though, and that's money. And we've got the Assembly Subcommittee now working on coming up with a plan to deal with homelessness. The plan's are already out there. And when this plan, this new group is done, without funding, it will die on the shelf. You gotta have the money to do it.
Ms. Craig Jackson and Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the committee, and I want to thank everybody in the audience that's here, and let you know that I really, really appreciate your comments. And I really appreciate your comments, Mr. What's your name again? Mr. Hess. Just kidding, Mr. Hess. Because first off, we were the homeless coordinator for 3 years, and I can say this, okay? Besides this, during first quarter budget revision, once again, I mean, I think the three of us brought it forward before, but once again, I can tell you right now, I'm going to bring forward a budget amendment to reinstate the homeless coordinator, period, because I think it was it's a much needed position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And I want to acknowledge, and I apologize if we didn't get word to you earlier about the change in what our location was. This meeting was about the AO regarding the alcohol tax.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a position? I know you made your way here. Do you have a position or comment you'd like to make regarding?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I had an urgent dental need, so that's where I was.
So it wasn't your fault, Paul?
No, it's nobody's fault except I'm sure my own. So as far as the alcohol tax, I'm sure that we're all clear that there are multiple uses for any revenue that came in. I know there was an S version, and so it kind of expanded a little more in the S version into the idea of perhaps funding treatment and things like that. So I'm sure Chief Mew had many, many comments on the way we could utilize these funds. When following the ADN series on the chronic alcoholism, what I did was I analyzed the articles, and of course I'm constantly working on options for housing as well as treatment. And one of the areas that we could enhance, whether it's through the taxes or not, is the reinvigorating of Title 47 involuntary commits for alcohol abuse. And if we did that, the way that has to work is we have to have access to detox and treatment. So if we do something like reinvigorating Title 47, which is cumbersome, time-consuming, and involves the medical field and the legal aspects, we have to be able to place people quickly into detoxic treatment. So any revenues that we have that can be utilized for this, in addition to special needs housing, you know, as you probably already have talked about, the research is in, if you will, on the Housing First project. And so that has been operating for 3 years now. And actually 4, when you think about the way it was December 8, 2011. So with that opening and the research being in, it's being finalized right now, it is showing the results we had expected. A distinct reduction in the people that live there, in their use, frequency of use, the ASP calls, AFD, and APD. So if we use that as our model and our template, there is a great deal we can do with expanded revenue. There's no shortage of what we could use it for. So rather than having an opinion on the tax, what we need is more revenue, however that comes to us.
And Ms. Freeman, if I might, Chief Neal.
At the risk of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, we've made multiple attempts at Title 47 over the years, and they stalled for various reasons. What I hope if we ever get there, what I hope we consider are the expenses of the legal expenses associated with due process. We usually think of the treatment beds and the facility, but some attorney's got to prosecute these cases and get them to the court, and that's got to be funded, or we're never going to get them in. The other thing that happens a lot of times is the process might start at a hospital. The hospital might even pick up the legal staff if they can, but who's going to transport those people from the hospital to the treatment center to court? That piece has never been nailed down. Is it medics? Is it police? Is it taxi cabs? These people aren't all appropriate for these kind of things, and that's a nut we should figure that out on the front end, because it's been problematic. And when we don't figure these things in advance, and then you got cops driving drunks all over town and taking them to court and stuff, and probably a better way to do that.
Mr. Hall.
Yeah, brand new topic. I am really pleased that we took action on public place in regards to marijuana. And I think the thing that gave validation was the fact that we have taken the initiative to move forward in things that particularly you, Chief Mueller, are seeing as things that are going to be important to give you, is the fact that now the legislature has pulled everything they've started back off the table and said, well, we're going to start over again. Yet they still hope to be ready by the 24th of February. So I really, as chair of the committee dealing with marijuana in our community, I really expect this committee to continue to weigh in heavy, particularly working through the chief and others in what we perceive as things that we need to do now. And I think the next big thing, we've got the legal department's going to be working on the hash, butane, making sure that we write. And, you know, the thing I'm hoping with that we come down with a heavy penalty in regards to that we have an incident. We understand we don't want to go there because the consequences are great.
The meeting I just left, Mr. Hall, was part of it was the punch list of stuff we got to get knocked out by the 24th, and we're working on it. Time is short.
It is. Well, I intend for the marijuana committee to try to work as closely with you as we can to be able to expedite that. But the majority of that is going to be coming straight from the legal department, the mayor's office, which is the best way to do it, because quite honestly, we don't have the time with the marijuana committee. But I'm not sure the legislature are going to be quite as efficient as they thought they were going to be in dealing with this. So we may end up actually issuing a license at the rate that it's currently going. Heaven forbid that ever happened.
It'll be interesting to see what else we get accomplished before the 24th, but we're going to have to launch a media campaign, a multi-pronged campaign to get the word out as to whatever the ground rules are going to be, and so that's another thing we're starting to flesh out.
Mr. Hall, or Mr. Train, sorry.
I'm not hauling. Yeah.
I'm looking at him.
We have 2 assembly meetings before we give a start date for marijuana, so we would need things that we want to deal with in our second meeting by the 3rd of February. Whether it's laid on the table, Because then we have the second meeting in February to pass it before the go-live date for marijuana. Just wanted to remind you of the time frame.
Thank you.
That's great,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can follow up on Mr. Trainey's comments, do you think we're going to need an additional appropriation of funds for this effort? Because I think that may be where you're coming from, Mr. Trainey.
The outstanding issues that require funding that I'm aware of right now won't kick in because of the public consumption ordinance that you guys did. That more relates to the OUI, the drug driving, the combination drunk and drug driving. We need to get the A-RIDE training and DRA training rolled out. We're going to be, depending how it plays out, there's two different tracks, but they both will add up to more blood. So there's more refrigeration, blood draw contracts, things like that. We're crunching those numbers, but I'm going to tentatively put it in the 300,000 area. I don't know who or where we're going to seek that money, or if we will, but that's going to be the price tag, I think, for dealing with the intoxicated driving aspect of where we're going here. Now that there could be state appropriation requests, even though we didn't make the book, or not. There could be first quarter requests or not. We could try and soak it up out of our budget or not. I mean, I'm not sure yet how we're going to deal with it, but we're probably talking around 300,000, and we're still trying to refine those numbers.
And if I can follow up,
Yes,
all right, everybody seems to focus on, the only time we can make changes to the budget is first quarter, and that's not true. Code says we can change the budget anytime we want to. So just keep that in mind. We don't have to focus on first quarter. We can appropriate money anytime we want. So when you need it and you can't get it from any other source, then, we need to know. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Jackson. I appreciate the reminder. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Freeman, I know you came in late, so I wanted you to know that this committee, through graciously Ms. Gray Jackson, seconded by Mr. Hall, unanimously is our resolution or our recommendation is this committee supports AO 2015-10S, which is the alcohol treatment, emergency transportation, housing programs, including housing programs for chronic inebriates. That version and its intent. So this will go to the body for Tuesday's meeting with that recommendation. And so just so you know that we did discuss things such as we're looking for, and Mr. Hall's going to work feverishly with his assistant, his legislative aide, to try to get some specifics to answer to some of the community concerns. Ms. Kelly.
Do you guys expect the percentage will be announced this Tuesday? And if not, when
Well,
do you?
actually, because before we can pass it, we're going to have to nail that down.
Okay. What form would that come? Would it be like an S1 version?
No, it'd just be a motion made.
A motion. Oh, okay, got it.
Fill in the dot.
Okay, got it.
Probably a C as well.
It'll be just a motion made.
And to my colleagues, with this marijuana 24th February, my question to each of us and our challenge is how do we start moving towards taxation on marijuana in our community?
We've got that great committee.
On the 24th. So we can get
Well, it's our committee, it's also the state. We've got to figure out what tax mechanisms the state's going to use so we can dovetail into it. I want to know what's going to make sense.
We don't need to worry about
Okay.
that part by the
Very good.
24th.
Very good. This meeting is adjourned. It is now 11:15. Thank you. Thank you for participating.